When people today think about longevity, they often imagine modern medicine, advanced diets, or cutting-edge research into anti-aging. But centuries before doctors spoke of calories, antioxidants, or exercise plans, there lived a man in Renaissance Italy who became one of history's earliest teachers of healthy living. His name was Luigi Cornaro, and his remarkable story shows that the secrets to long life were already being discovered 500 years ago. Cornaro was born into a wealthy Venetian family in 1467. Venice at the time was a thriving city-state, rich in culture, trade, and luxury. But life expectancy was short. Most people lived only into their 30s or 40s, and very few saw old age. Poor sanitation, lack of medical care, and recurring plagues meant that even the privileged were not guaranteed long lives. Yet Cornaro defied the odds, living all the way to the age of 98. That was an extraordinary achievement in the 1500s, nearly doubling or tripling the average lifespan. Even more impressive, he lived those years with clarity of mind, strength of body, and a joy for life that made him famous across Europe. But his path to longevity was not straightforward. In his youth, Cornaro lived much like other nobles of Venice, lavishly, indulgently, and without restraint. Banquets, heavy drinking, rich foods, and long nights of excess were part of his everyday life. By his mid-30s, the consequences of this lifestyle caught up with him. He suffered from chronic illness, weakness, and a body so frail that physicians told him he would not live much longer. To hear a death sentence at such a young age would have crushed most men, but for Cornaro, it became the turning point of his life. Faced with early death, he chose to transform himself. He gave up the excesses of his youth and adopted a lifestyle built on moderation and discipline. He drastically reduced the amount of food and wine he consumed, carefully measured his portions, and focused only on what his body needed to stay strong. Slowly, his health returned. His energy grew. His illnesses faded, and in their place came a vitality he had never known before. What began as an act of survival became a lifelong commitment, and ultimately, the foundation of his longevity formula. Cornaro's transformation was so successful that he felt compelled to share it. In his 60s, 70s, and even into his 90s, he wrote a series of essays known collectively as Discourses on the Temperate Life. These writings became some of the most widely read health guides of the Renaissance. In them, Cornaro argued that moderation was the key not only to survival but to thriving. He explained that by controlling appetite and avoiding excess, the body could remain strong, the mind clear, and the spirit joyful, even into advanced old age. His works were reprinted across Europe, influencing thinkers, physicians, and ordinary readers alike. In many ways, he became one of history's first self-help authors, centuries before the genre existed. Why does his story matter to us today? Because the principles he discovered are strikingly consistent with what modern science says about healthy aging. We now know that overeating and indulgence cause inflammation, obesity, diabetes, and heart disease. Studies on calorie moderation show that eating less, without malnutrition, can extend life and improve health. Cornaro, without laboratories or medical equipment, discovered the same truth by paying attention to his body. His life was proof that restraint and discipline could add decades of health, even in an age when medicine offered little help. Cornaro's achievement was especially remarkable because of the time in which he lived. In 16th century Italy, people faced constant threats to health, from infectious disease to famine. For someone to not only survive but thrive until nearly 100 was almost unheard of. Many around him would have assumed he was blessed by fortune, but Cornaro insisted his longevity was not luck. It was a deliberate choice. He argued that any person, noble or poor, could extend their life by following the same rules of moderation and balance. What made his philosophy even more powerful was his positive outlook. He didn't describe his temperate life as grim or joyless. On the contrary, he wrote passionately about how moderation gave him more happiness, not less. He claimed that light eating and self-control allowed him to enjoy each day with a clear mind, steady energy, and a peaceful spirit. He argued that gluttony and indulgence robbed life of quality, while simplicity preserved joy. In his words, by eating less, he was able to live more. His writings also revealed his gratitude for old age. At a time when most dreaded growing older, Cornaro celebrated it. He saw aging not as decline but as the reward for discipline. He believed that a temperate life not only lengthened the years but also enriched them, allowing the elderly to enjoy wisdom, peace, and the company of family for longer. His optimism made him unique among his contemporaries and continues to inspire readers today. In many ways, Luigi Cornaro's life offers a timeless mirror to our own world. In an era when many of us struggle with abundance, endless food choices, oversized portions, constant indulgence, his voice echoes across the centuries. Moderation is the foundation of vitality. His story reminds us that health is not always about new discoveries or technology. Sometimes, the simplest wisdom, avoiding excess and living in balance, is the most powerful. The first and most important key move in Luigi Cornaro's longevity formula was radical moderation in food and drink. It was this change that transformed him from a dying man in his 30s into one of the healthiest elders of his century. Before his transformation, Cornaro ate and drank with abandon. Venice in the 1500s was famous for its feasts, wines, and extravagant lifestyles, and as a wealthy noble, Cornaro took full advantage. But years of indulgence broke down his body until doctors warned him that he had little time left. That was when he made a decision that shocked everyone around him. He cut back almost everything. Cornaro measured out his meals with great precision. According to his writings, he restricted himself to about 12 ounces of solid food and 14 ounces of wine per day. For a man of his class, who once enjoyed endless banquets, this was a radical reduction. Yet he insisted it was the perfect amount, enough to keep him nourished, but never so much as to burden his body. His meals were simple: bread, soup, eggs, small portions of meat, and sometimes fish or poultry. He kept the portions modest, avoided heavy sauces and rich foods, and ensured that he never ate to the point of discomfort. What's fascinating is how closely his practice aligns with what modern scientists now call calorie restriction. Numerous studies across animals and humans show that reducing calorie intake, without malnutrition, can extend lifespan, lower disease risk, and improve energy. Cornaro discovered this truth centuries before science gave it a name. His reasoning was simple. Overeating was like overloading a machine. Too much fuel clogged the system, while moderation allowed the body to run smoothly. Cornaro also believed moderation in food kept the mind clear. He often wrote that heavy meals left people sluggish, unable to think, and prone to irritability. Light eating, on the other hand, left him sharp, cheerful, and able to focus on his work. In his discourses on the temperate life, he described with pride how his memory, clarity, and judgment improved after he adopted this regimen. To him, the mind and body were inseparable, and food was the bridge between the two. Importantly, Cornaro never argued against enjoying food. He still drank wine every day, but in moderation. He still allowed himself small pleasures, but always within limits. His philosophy was not to deny the joys of life, but to control them so they could be savored without harm. He insisted that true pleasure came not from indulgence, but from balance. A man who ate little, he argued, often enjoyed more than a man who ate much. The benefits of his approach soon became obvious. As he reduced his intake, his health returned. His illnesses faded, his strength improved, and he began to live with renewed energy. He continued this way of eating for decades, and by his 70s and 80s, he was still active, still writing, and still enjoying life. He often compared himself to his peers, noting how many had already died or suffered weakness, while he remained strong. To him, this was proof that temperance was the true secret of longevity. Today, Cornaro's philosophy feels strikingly relevant. In a world where overconsumption has become one of the leading causes of disease, his wisdom offers a counterpoint. Obesity, diabetes, and heart disease often stem from eating too much and too often. Cornaro's insistence on smaller meals and controlled portions sounds almost prophetic. He anticipated the idea of mindful eating long before the term existed. To make his point clear, Cornaro often told his readers that the body did not require nearly as much as people assumed. He compared excessive eating to overwatering a plant. Just as too much water can drown the roots, too much food drowns the body. By finding the balance, he said, life could be prolonged and health preserved. Imagine his daily life in contrast with others of his time. While nobles sat at feasts, overindulging in roasted meats and strong wines, Cornaro sat with a simple plate of bread, vegetables, and a measured glass of wine. While his peers suffered gout, indigestion, and early death, Cornaro walked through his 90s with steady energy and a clear mind. His choice to reduce his intake made him the exception to the rule, a man who cheated death not by avoiding food, but by respecting it. If moderation in eating and drinking was the foundation of Luigi Cornaro's longevity, his second key move was equally important: living a balanced, temperate lifestyle in all things. For Cornaro, health was not just about food, it was about harmony in body, mind, and spirit. He believed that excess in any area, whether it was work, pleasure, or emotion, could destroy health just as quickly as overeating. In his discourses on the temperate life, Cornaro explained that just as overeating weakens the body, uncontrolled passions weaken the soul. He warned against anger, greed, and constant worry, describing them as poisons that drain vitality. To him, emotions had as much power over health as food did. A man who lived in constant rage or fear, he argued, wore down his body from within. In contrast, a calm, steady, and contented mind gave strength and longevity. Cornaro practiced this philosophy daily. He lived simply, avoiding the extremes of indulgence and idleness. He valued moderation in work, making sure not to exhaust himself, yet he also avoided laziness. He filled his days with meaningful but measured activity, writing, managing his affairs, and spending time with family and friends. His belief was that life should flow like a well-tuned instrument, not too fast, not too slow, but in harmony. Modern science strongly supports his insights. Today we know that chronic stress can damage the immune system, accelerate aging, and increase the risk of heart disease and stroke. Conversely, emotional balance, calmness, and a positive outlook protect health and extend life. Practices like mindfulness and stress management are considered essential for wellness today. Yet Cornaro was already teaching the same lessons in the 1500s. What makes Cornaro's approach especially remarkable is how practical it was. He didn't recommend extreme sacrifices or rigid rules. Instead, he advocated for steady, consistent habits. Go to bed at a reasonable hour. Wake early and greet the day calmly. Engage in useful work but avoid overexertion. Eat and drink moderately. Keep emotions in check. Avoid unnecessary drama and excess. For him, health was not about sudden bursts of discipline but about a rhythm of life that remained steady over decades. He often compared this rhythm to the natural order of the seasons. Just as nature thrives when the weather is balanced, not too hot, not too cold, so too does the human body thrive in moderation. To live wildly in extremes was, in his words, to fight against nature itself. But to live temperately was to align with the natural flow of life, which rewarded harmony with health and years. Cornaro also saw balance as the key to happiness. He argued that the man who lived temperately enjoyed more pleasure than the one who indulged recklessly. Excess, he said, dulled joy. The glutton might eat more food, but he also suffered indigestion and fatigue. The angry man might shout louder, but he also carried bitterness and unrest. By contrast, the temperate man, satisfied with enough, enjoyed deeper peace and more lasting happiness. This perspective gave Cornaro not only health but also a cheerful spirit that endured into old age. For today's world, Cornaro's lesson on balance is especially relevant. Many modern health problems are not just about food but about stress, overwork, and emotional turmoil. We live in a culture of extremes, long hours, constant stimulation, and relentless pursuit of more. Cornaro's voice, echoing across 5 centuries, reminds us that longevity is not built in chaos but in balance. His life shows that by calming our emotions, simplifying our habits, and finding harmony, we give ourselves the gift of lasting energy and health. If moderation in eating gave Luigi Cornaro strength, and balance in lifestyle kept him steady, his third and most profound key move was his positive outlook and unwavering sense of purpose. For Cornaro, longevity was not simply about surviving longer than others. It was about living with joy, gratitude, and usefulness right up until the final days of life. In his writings, Cornaro spoke often about how a temperate life was not dull or restrictive, but instead the key to real freedom and happiness. He argued that moderation gave him more liberty, not less, because it freed him from the burdens of sickness, weakness, and overindulgence. He contrasted himself with men who indulged recklessly, saying that while they became slaves to appetite and disease, he enjoyed each day with a light body and a clear mind. Old age, he claimed, did not have to be feared. It could be one of the most rewarding stages of life if one arrived there in health and peace. Cornaro described his later years as deeply fulfilling. Even in his 80s and 90s, he wrote essays and letters, reflecting on philosophy and encouraging others to adopt a temperate lifestyle. He found joy not in grand pleasures, but in the ordinary gifts of life, the warmth of the sun, the company of loved ones, the satisfaction of useful work. He insisted that old age could be joyful and dignified, not a time of decline, but a season of wisdom. He was not bitter or fearful but grateful, savoring every extra year as a blessing. Modern science echoes his insights. Today, studies consistently show that optimism, gratitude, and purpose contribute to longer life and better health. Seniors who stay engaged and maintain a positive outlook tend to live longer and recover more quickly from illness. Conversely, bitterness, hopelessness, and social isolation often accelerate decline. Cornaro intuitively understood this truth centuries before it was confirmed by psychology and medicine. One of his most inspiring lessons was that it is never too late to change. Cornaro did not live temperately from youth. He was nearly destroyed by his own reckless indulgence in his 30s, when doctors told him that he had little time left. But rather than give up, he transformed his life, embraced moderation, and went on to live 6 more decades. His story demonstrates that even those who feel it is too late to begin can start anew, and by doing so, they may still add years and vitality to their lives. Cornaro also rejected the idea that old age should be spent in idleness. He believed strongly in usefulness, insisting that older people should continue contributing to society in whatever ways they could, through work, through teaching, through guiding the younger generation. He himself embodied this principle, producing his most famous writings not in his youth, but in his later years. For him, having a purpose was just as vital as eating moderately or keeping emotions calm. Purpose was nourishment for the soul, and without it, even a strong body would wither. Gratitude was another defining feature of his philosophy. Cornaro often wrote that his temperate lifestyle allowed him to enjoy small things more deeply than others enjoyed excess. A simple piece of bread or a glass of wine became, in his words, more satisfying than the feasts of his youth. By living with restraint, he sharpened his appreciation for the ordinary, and that appreciation brought him peace. His gratitude helped him stay emotionally balanced, and in turn, reinforced his health. It is easy to picture Cornaro in his later years, seated in Venice, writing reflections on life while surrounded by the peace he had cultivated. Many of his peers were long gone, victims of disease, excess, or despair, yet he endured into his late 90s, still strong, still cheerful, and still thankful. His life was not only a triumph of physical discipline but also a triumph of spirit. For people today, his final lesson is perhaps the most encouraging. Longevity is not simply about what we avoid, but about what we embrace. Cornaro avoided excess, but he embraced joy, usefulness, and gratitude. He demonstrated that the key to lasting vitality is not fear of aging, but acceptance of it as a natural and even beautiful stage of life. By entering old age with optimism and purpose, we can make it not a time of decline but of wisdom and fulfillment. Looking back on his nearly century-long life, it becomes clear that Cornaro's formula was both simple and profound. Moderation in food sustained his body. Balance in lifestyle preserved his peace. And his positive outlook gave meaning to all of it. These were not abstract theories but lived truths that carried him to 98 years of age in an era when most barely reached 40. His story is still alive today because it speaks to something universal, the human desire not just to live long, but to live well. Cornaro's voice continues to echo across the centuries, reminding us that health is not a matter of chance but of choice. He showed that with discipline, gratitude, and purpose, it is possible to add not only years to life but life to years. He truly was the man who cheated death in the 1500s, not with wealth or medicine, but with wisdom that remains as relevant now as it was 500 years ago.